Okay, so we are going to mix some colors with green to get an idea of the different types of greens that we can get. So our set of paints comes with this specific green. It's a very cool color, the cool colors being green, blue, and purple. But we want to see, how can I get something that's not just this green? Because when I'm looking at different plants, I see a variety of types of green. Sometimes the green is warmer. Sometimes the green is much lighter or more yellowy. Sometimes the green looks more brown. So how do I get this variety so that I can communicate these different greens? Okay, so the first thing that you guys are gonna do is you're going to take your filbert brush. This is the smaller, or like the medium-sized one that's rounded. And go ahead and activate your green. And we're just gonna put a little puddle of green in 6 different wells. I don't want it to be super runny, and I don't need a lot. I don't want to waste the paint, but I need a little bit. 2, 3, 4, 5. One more. Okay. So once you have green in all 3, now this is usually what a color wheel looks like, and it shows us all the different colors. We are just going to paint this in. I'm actually going to go right from the pan in my paint set and paint this green in. We're going to try and keep the upper level to be like our darker values. So this is a little bit more not solid, because watercolor is still transparent, but oops, it's a little bit darker because I have more paint versus water. Okay, so once you're done painting this in, you're just gonna dip your brush in the water, and with that watered down version of the green, paint in the little triangle underneath. And then dry your brush off on the towel. Okay, so now why don't we work, we'll work counterclockwise, and we'll do yellow next. So rinsing my brush off, getting a little bit of yellow from my palette, and I am going to, let's see, mix this into one of the wells. So my first well just stays green. The next one, I'm mixing it with the green that's there, and I'm painting this in here. So I have quite a lot of green compared to the yellow. If I make lighter marks, that's what this looks like. Let's see, I'm gonna take some more yellow and add that in here and see how it changes. And in my little mixing space, I'm gonna just mix a little bit of green in. Again, I think I overdid it. Take a little bit more yellow. Because I really want this to highlight what it looks like when I have mostly yellow with a little bit of green. I get this beautiful, bright color. So if I mix yellow in to my green, this is the effect. Okay, I'm gonna rinse my brush and switch to activating the orange. think what we can do is add a little more water. I can just start out with some just plain orange here. And then go into my next well where I have green and stir this around. And it gives me a much browner sort of green, like a very olive green. And I can mix that into the orange even more. And below, I can make some lighter marks. I'm gonna rinse my brush, dry my brush, dip back in here, and make some slightly paler marks here. If I add even more orange to this, it looks even more brown. If I mix this with the, what will happen if I mix this with the yellow? I might not have enough. Yeah, it gives me, again, a different sort of brown green. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush. Okay, now onto red. Activate the red. I'm just gonna put a little bit of red here. And I'm gonna put the red into the green. This is still quite a lot of red. So I'm gonna dry my brush off and I'm gonna scoop up my original green here and mix that in. And it actually gives me almost a gray, which is really interesting. A lot of times when you mix red and green, it will give you brown. In theory, it should either give you brown or gray, and it definitely gives you gray in the watercolor paints. And let's see, I didn't do the pale versions. Just spread this out a little more so it's thinner, and I get a lighter version of these colors. All right, I'm gonna rinse my brush. And I'm gonna activate the violet. Violet here. Scrape this off of my brush. Get my green. And I think that this will do something similar. Yeah, it's also turning gray, kind of a bluer gray. Dry my brush, rinse, dry. Okay, activate the blue. And in my last well here, oh yeah, put a little one here. In my last well, mix this around. I don't have maybe enough paint. See how light this is? I need to activate the paint a little bit more. Because I want this top row to be darker. There we go. Here I can spread this out a little more. Okay. So this gives me an idea of the ways that I can alter the green. This isn't watercolor paper, but it gives us a pretty good idea of how the colors will turn out or can turn out if I mix it with these different colors. Okay, so now before we get to making leaf colors, let's work on shading. If I want a darker value, then I need less water. If I want a lighter value, then I need more water. So when I paint this pot right here, let's see, I'm gonna rinse my brush and I'm gonna get some orange. Put that back here. Get some orange. A little bit of red. Rinse my brush and get a little bit of brown. Okay, we'll mix these together. Okay, when I paint this in, if I want my shadow to be on the left, then I want to paint more thickly on the left. I can even paint the whole left side. And I can paint across, and as my brush runs out of paint, it will naturally get lighter. I can dip my brush in the water and it's gonna continue to paint across, but now the paint is thinner. I need a little more though from the tray. And if you pull the water back, like wherever you end your brush stroke is usually where it's going to be the darkest. Now let's say I take some, let's take some blue. I'm gonna scoop some of my mixture into the blue. Blue is a great color to use to create a darker value, or purple is also a great color to add a darker value. I'm not pressing down on this. If I press down on it, it would get very frayed and it would start to create like a hole. Oh, because there's a lip on this, I'm actually gonna bring this line all the way across and just feather this out. If I have too much paint on my brush, it's just going to continue to move this dark value all the way across. So what I can do is just dry this brush off on my towel, and then it allows me to sort of go between the values, like a medium or light value. And I just add some water to my brush so it's a little more runny, And I can make a shadow for this, simply painting straight out to the side, and it should start at the bottom of the pot right here, and it should connect all the way around the part where the pot is sitting. If I had dirt inside, I could grab some brown. Sometimes it can come out pretty flat if you just use just brown. So I could take a little bit of blue into this, and it just breaks it up. I could have done green or any other color. I'm just kind of dabbing so I get like a different texture. If I move my brush in a straight line, I will get straight line texture. If I move my brush around, then I get a fun, different kind of texture. And dirt definitely doesn't necessarily have a smooth texture to it. So making the motion of your brush is also important. Okay, this part I want you guys to do somewhat on your own. One thing I do want to show you is, as a reminder, when you are painting, you can lay down an initial layer. So like I might take yellow and I might paint, this is the snake plant leaf. I just did a few different leaves. Originally I was gonna have you draw the plant, and then I decided to draw it for you so you could just practice making some different greens. So I could paint this whole thing yellow first, because I know the snake plant has yellow edges on its leaves. And then once that's dry, I can paint in the light green strip that goes through the middle. And when that's dry, then I can paint the dark green stripes that are on top of those. That's what I did here. So that would be glazing, right? Where I put a layer of paint down, let it dry, do another layer, let it dry. That's glazing. Another thing that I can do is I can put some wet like yellow on here, and then come back and take some green, maybe a little bit of orange, mix up a type of green, and then add that here, and it's gonna kind of just become like a little bit splotchy, and that's wet on wet, right? If the paint is still wet and I'm layering it on top, it's gonna mix. Come and take a different green and add that in. It's gonna move around. And I'm moving around these spots because these spots are actually pink and yellow on this type of leaf. Okay, so that's a different technique. You want to pay attention to your values. I could paint this all very thin again, and another way of doing glazing is that I could add another layer. So this is the part of the leaf that is the underside right here, and then here and up here, this is the other half of the leaf the inside of the leaf. So that might be lighter because the light might be hitting that directly, and this might be darker. So once I've done an entire layer, I might go back and get more green, and then do a different kind of green on this layer to make it darker. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and experiment with this. And I also want you to paint this pot with the shadow coming out to the side. Paint the dirt. Don't forget to paint the inside rim of the pot. And let's see what you guys come up with.